name is Jacques Bruna. In some circles, wow, that's loud. I'm known as the rapper Bluebird. A lot of people grow up here and get tired of the lack of culture because of the city we're situated in, and we're constantly overshadowed by Miami, so it's wonderful to see the art and creative community growing here in my city. So give yourselves a round of applause a little bit for that. So today, Creative Mornings, we're here to talk about sound. Obviously, I was asked to come talk about sound because I am a rapper, and rap involves sound. And when I was first asked to do this, I kind of struggled with what I was going to talk about because my intellectual ego got a little bit excited and bubbled over thinking about all the things I could come in and teach. And then I thought it might be a little bit pretentious for me to come up here and stand here in front of you and think that I could teach you something about sound, because I am no engineer by any means. I cannot read music. If you asked me what key a song was in, I would look at you with a blank face. But that being said, I have chased sound. It has been my life's passion for the last nearly 20 years. I've chased it all around the world. And so what I figured I would do is talk to you a little bit about the sounds that inspired me to do what I do, and how my actions and the choices I made and all the experiences I had affected the sound of my music. So let's start out by talking about the definition of sound. Sound is just transmitted vibrations in any frequency. And for some reason early on in my life, I have no idea why, but it was those specifically low frequencies that captured my heart. The bass music of Miami and Fort Lauderdale. I had an older brother who was 4 years older than me, and one of my earliest memories is I was 9 years old, and I could hear the sound coming out of his bedroom through his Sears subwoofer speaker stacks. And that sound was Posse in Effect by the Beastie Boys. It was a simple, yes, yes, y'all. And I remember just like being mesmerized and walking down the hall, and he was just kind of standing there in front of his speakers, dumbfounded, and looking at me like, do you hear this? You know, and I was only 9 years old, but I knew right then and there that I wanted this. This is what I want. Something in that sound really drove my heart. And when my brother turned 16 and he got his first car, he got a canary yellow Volkswagen Beetle. And much to my mother's dismay, one of the first things he did was he pulled out the back seat and installed a speaker box with two 18-inch subwoofers in that back seat. And it would rattle so hard that the bolts would loosen in the pieces of the car. And every month he'd have to go in there with a wrench and tighten it up. And when I got old enough to ride to school with him, he would make me ride in the back seat, which no longer really existed, sitting between the two speakers, plugging my ear and just holding my heart because I loved the sound. It was the bass that drew me in. And like I said, the Beastie Boys, and then we went on to listen to Miami Bass and the Two Live Crew. And luckily enough, through good parenting, I was able to see through the misogyny and just kind of feel the beats and understand that this is what drove me. And there was something that I was very passionate about, yet I just didn't understand what it was yet. So as I grew older and I started digging into more music and listening, I used to go buy, who remembers the big box CDs that used to come in full cardboard packaging with the graphics all the way up and down? Maybe a couple of us, we can betray our age. And what I got obsessed with is MCs speaking and the point that there could be a message and all these words put together, and that became my life's mission. Excuse my language, but fuck you, I'm old, but you can never tell unless you know how long I've been around. Spent half my life dug underground, but I'm an overseas and tightly wound. Recoil. Spoiler alert, it just gets worse. I've got the solution. Let's all just kill ourselves and fill ourselves with false hope fiction. Being alive is just an addiction we can kick. Yes, we can. So here's the plan. Let's pour our hearts into hostility, then get mad while the world isn't willing to eat our shit. Or just quit, but that would make you a quitter. If shit is stop pissing vinegar, never yield, go ask Alice. I've got a shield built out of callus, sitting pretty on my blue-collar palace. The bohemian rap king of diamonds, the lonely island with no Justin. Crystal lake, I'm a crystal ball of crystal meth. Every breath brings me closer to better off dead. Every word said is a shovel of shit upon my coffin. I don't wish often, but when I do, I wish that my eyes would just bleed so I can quit counting these magic beans. The jealousy's in the genes. Feed it for likes and follows. I'd swallow the internet whole and spread out a bowl of Cheerios, but so cheeks and I was romantic as satin. This isn't Lower Manhattan. This is downtown Fort Lauderdale, Fat Village, Creative Mornings, General Provisions, right? That's where we are. Thank you, man. So what happened was, as I grew up, I feel like so did rap music. You know, when the Beastie Boys started out, they were all about drinking and partying, but then sooner or later, you know, they grew a conscience, and, you know, MCA, may he rest in peace, befriended the Dalai Lama and started talking about the plight of the Tibetan people, and it became really cool to have a message in music. So, you know, not only was I obsessed with lyrics, and my mother used to yell at me all the time, you know, if you only focused on your schoolwork as much as you focused on these rap lyrics, you could be a doctor or a lawyer one day. And I was like, yeah, that's cool, but I want to be a rapper one day, not a doctor or a lawyer, because, you know, rap is important to me. And so I was kind of an outcast in high school, because by the time 1995 rolled around and everybody was listening to things like Biggie and Tupac, who I respect, but I was already beyond that. I was searching for those beat poets, the inner city griots, and I was listening to all this weird music that people around in my high school in Fort Lauderdale, I went to Nova Public School, they really couldn't grasp, so I was kind of an outcast. And not until I went up to Orlando and went to college did I find myself around a group of like-minded people who understood the things that I liked, because we had the same tastes. And from there is when I dug into and started exploring farther into the weird fringes of music. And some of my friends are here today that introduced me to some of that stuff. Shout out Zach G. He introduced me, you know, we started studying John Cage and the minimalist composers, and we listened to Frank Zappa and the Mothers of Invention and Brian Eno, and started going farther and farther, and soon enough, the rap music that we were listening to and making didn't sound like rap music anymore. And there was people who were saying, oh, that's not rap, and you know, we were fine with that. We were content with just saying, like, this is just music, you know? So it's safe to say that in college I experimented. We were experimenting with all different kinds of rap music, and we dug deeper and deeper. And eventually it turned from bass in lyrics, I started learning about production. And I lived with this really amazing producer for a few months, and I got kind of a crash course in production and how, you know, beats were made, and I really started focusing on the drums. You know, at first it was the bass sounds and then the lyrics, and then it came down to the drums. The drums were really the driving force, you know, the heartbeat behind the music that drove me to, you know, speak a million miles a minute and throw all these words together. You know, in the famous words of Outkast, as long as there's that tick, tick, followed by that bump, it was really the beat of my heart. And I started to perform with live drummers, which was amazing, because the energy you feel when you lock in with a live drummer on stage, and he kind of starts going faster, and then you can kind of start going faster, and then you kind of affect each other. This was really an exciting thing for me. And I started learning about the sampling of old records, and I used to go dig in the flea markets. We would stay up all night so we could be at the flea market at 7 in the morning when they opened, and we would push each other aside with our elbows just digging for these records so we could find that little piece of a break that you would miss if you were listening to that record as a whole, but if your ears were hearing just this 5-second chop of drums that you could separate and sample, and it would become an entire beat, and it would really change the music. So my musical world was definitely very opened up. And so here I was. I went off into the world after college, and I thought I knew it all. I joined a touring band, and I started touring in the United States and Canada, and then I broke out into Europe and Asia, started going to Japan, and that was it. I thought I knew it all. I had all these lofty ideas. I thought I was going to go out with my rap music and change the world, right? Nobody could tell me anything. And all these experiences, you know, started opening me up to new ideas. The first time I ever played a solo show in Europe was in Athens, Greece. And the promoter was a 15-year-old girl. And her father had to pick me up from the airport. And here I was with dreadlocks and tattoos, and his parents didn't speak any English, and I had to sleep in her little brother's bedroom. And I remember waking up the morning of the show in this little Greek boy's bedroom with these angry parents just kind of begrudgingly feeding me breakfast, like, okay, American rapper, just get out of our house, stay away from our daughter. And thinking, what the hell am I doing? How did I get here? But when I went to the show that night, this promoter had really done her homework, and she had pushed my music onto all the people in the local scene, and there was at least 100 people there who were singing and knowing my lyrics, and it really blew my mind and really changed things for me. So I started pushing farther after that. The farther I traveled, the more exciting it could be. The farther east in Europe that I could go, the more places I could go where people didn't speak my language. It just got exciting for me. The fact that the sounds that I was bringing could connect us. But sometimes I would go to places where I felt like the music wasn't enough to connect with people, so I would try to do so through entertainment or politics or humor. So the first time I ever went to Berlin, I played this really amazing show. It was in a room about this size, packed, like 300 people. I had somehow weaseled my way onto a show with one of my musical heroes, opening up for him. It was another American named Soul. And so I step on stage in Berlin thinking, let me break the ice with a little bit of humor. So I said how it was a great opportunity for me to play in the beautiful city of Berlin, being that I come from Jewish heritage. I started off with, my grandma and your grandma sitting by the fire. My grandma said to your grandma, no wait, my grandma was in the fire. Talk about hey now. Hey now, just crickets and angry faces. Boy, I learned a hard lesson that night. But the second I started rapping, their faces lit up. And I went into a spoken word, much like what I did earlier, and it completely changed the tone of the room. And I learned a hard lesson that night that, it's sometimes you just have to accept that you're going to be different than what they expect, but the sound that they can appreciate can connect you. And, I ended up having many good conversations and learning that Germans did not like to joke about that kind of thing, even though I thought I would just kind of lighten the mood a little bit. That was one hard lesson that I learned. So I traveled further and further, and I found myself in some other places where I thought the music would never bring me, and I kind of became known as like this rebellious, kind of political, humorous rap pundit, right? And so fast forward a few years, and I got invited to play in Amman, Jordan, with a Palestinian rap group on July 4th, which I thought was pretty comical. I'm not gonna lie, I was definitely scared. I was living in Berlin at the time. I did walk around in the sun for a couple days and get myself extra tan. I did my best to grow my beard out, and I traveled on my Italian passport. And when I arrived, the people in this group that were super hardline political Palestinians ended up being some of the warmest and funniest people that I had ever met. And I found that throughout the world, no matter where I went, no matter how far I traveled, if there was people that were as laser focused into this weird niche rap music that I enjoyed, that no matter what, we had a common ground with each other. And the show ended up being amazing. Of course, I joked about how I came from Jewish heritage, and the first tattoo that I got was my name in Arabic, and how my Jewish mother hated that. They thought that was kind of funny. But the best experience when I was a mom came when I was leaving and flying back to Berlin, and I got hung up at security in the airport. And I started kind of sweating because security guards started surrounding me, and they opened my bag and they found all these guitar pedals and these weird music boxes that I had made and bought. And the one in particular was just a box with a bunch of knobs on it with a battery duct taped to the back of it. They really did not enjoy this. And I started worrying because there was definitely a language barrier, and the more questions they asked me, the more flubbed I started getting, and I started getting nervous, and they called over their boss, who was not a nice looking man. And he came walking from across the room, just staring right at me, and he had, the military hat and the bars and the huge Tom Selleck Arab mustache. It was, I was in awe. And he walked up to me, and first thing he did was he pulled my bag open, and all these stickers fell out that had this cool hip hop picture of me with this ghetto blaster on it. And I had a good friend who got arrested in New York years before for putting up stickers. So the first thing I thought of was, I'm going to jail in Jordan for graffiti or something like that. And this general, he picked up the sticker and he held it next to me and he said, "Is this you?" And there was no denying that it was me. So I said, "Of course, yes, that's me." And he said, "You make rock or rap?" And there I was at the crossroads facing okay. I looked deep into his eyes, I tried to look into his heart, and I said, "What sound does this guy enjoy?" And there it was, it just came out. I said, "Rap," and his whole face changed, and he said, "I like rap." And I said, "Oh, this is wonderful." And he put his arm around me and made his security guards push all my equipment back in the bag, and they streamlined me right through security, pretty much to the front of the plane. I got a military escort through the airport, and they welcomed me back to their country anytime that I wanted to come back, and I gave every single one of them a sticker. And I like to think somewhere there's like a Jordanian tank with a bluebird sticker on it. So I became focused on writing an album. And one of the experiences that really affected me was one more world experience. I got the amazing opportunity, I got invited to play in Mumbai with a classically trained jazz pianist. And I felt like this was way out of my league here. And I had to play 3 nights in the same club with this amazing jazz pianist and this free jazz French drummer. And it was 3 nights in the same club, 2 one-hour sets. So I was really excited because it was mostly going to be freestyle, which I was really into, just kind of making it all up as I went, especially with the live band. You know, like I said before, that feeling of locking in with the drummer. It's just something special. So the first night I got up there and this crazy French drummer noticed that the faster he would go, the faster I would go. And we were having a great time. The pianist was kind of looking at us like, okay guys. And so this guy, he was from Switzerland. His name was Leo Tardin, a really well-respected, award-winning jazz pianist. He sat me down in the break in between the 2 sets and he said, Jacques, don't get me wrong. I really appreciate what you're doing here, but you're going too fast. And it was kind of a blow to my ego because I thought, man, I'm up here doing great. What am I supposed to do? I have to, continuously blather for 2 hours a night. I'm just going to do what I know. But he said, the sound is cool and I appreciate the energy. But he said, you need to slow down. You need to think about the space in between your words. And I took what he said, I took it to heart, and I listened to him, and I really tried to do my best for the following nights to kind of put some space, because he said, listen, maybe 1 out of the people in this crowd is going to understand all the words that you're saying, and sure, we're having a good time with the energy, but you really need to put some more emphasis on the words and leave some space in between to think about what you're saying. And I took it to heart, and I did my best that night to continue doing what he had asked, but that really didn't come into fruition until I sat down in 2012 to make the first solo album I had made in a couple years. It was called Cannonball. And I had the awesome opportunity to work with these great musicians from Jacksonville, Florida. One named Astronautilus, who was an amazing rapper and a songwriter, and the other being Radical Face, who was a great composer and folk musician. And now Astronautilus taught me a lot about not only songwriting, but back to the words, he taught me a lot about inflection and enunciation of words. And I never thought about that. I just thought as long as I could get these words out in a cool way onto the beat, that it would sound great. But he taught me about how the way you put inflection on the last word in your sentence could really change the meaning of how somebody perceives what you're saying. And that was a really important lesson for me. Because then when it came time to finish the album, I sat down with Radical Face, who taught me more about composition and harmonies and creating tension. You know, the peaks and valleys in a song, and that's how great composers and songwriters, they drew people in. For me, it was always full bore, 100 miles an hour. Here's the beat, here's a bunch of words on top of it. But they taught me about the structure and the composure, and the ebb and the flow, and how that tension created drama in a song, and it really brought people in. So on that album, I sought out to make a really personal song. I had done a lot of personal music, but on this particular album, I wanted to make one song that would make my hardworking immigrant father proud. Right? So my father came from a very small village in Italy. Top of a mountain, tiny village, a little farming village. He was the only one in his family who ever left to come to America. And he struggled here in Miami, arrived in the 70s, and built a life for our family. And I really appreciated that. He instilled in me a very hard work ethic. So when it became time for me to go out on my own and be a rapper, I don't think my father really understood what I was trying to do. Because he said, that's cool, that's interesting, but that's not work. He didn't really understand the sacrifice and the work that I was really willing to put into that. And not until years later, when he saw how much I was actually willing to give up and how hard I was willing to work, did he really appreciate it. So to honor that, I set out to write this one song about this experience I had in my father's village. Years before, he had taken my whole family back to this village, and in the cellar of our family house, there was these bottles of wine that my grandfather had made for me on the year I was born. He hand wrote my name, spelled incorrect because he had an elementary education, but who's to judge him? He was making his own wine, right? It said Jackie, in the year I was born, 1977. There we go, now you know how old I am. And I got to drink some of these bottles of wine with my family, and it was a very profound experience. So I sat down to write this song, and it was the first of its kind for me to write something so personal and so specific about my family. And it really made an impact. I've actually had the opportunity to perform this song a few times in front of my father and saw him shed a tear, which was pretty much like squeezing water out of a rock. He's a very hard individual. And the most amazing thing is for me to see the effects that song had on the people around me. Because at this point in my career, we can say career, I had made a lot of music, and a lot of people from around the world had come to me and said, hey, this particular song, it helped me through a hard time, but I really felt like I had never made an impact with my music. But this song that I was talking about was made in 2012, and still to this day, I have people coming up to me at shows and telling me, I have no idea how much this meant to me. And to further exemplify that, there's these fans of mine now that come from all parts of Europe when they're traveling through Italy, people from Poland and Germany and Czech Republic who they go through the bottom of the mountain where the village for the sign is, and they take pictures of the sign near my father's village so they can put them up on Facebook. And I tried to show my father that, and he didn't really understand, but believe it or not, everyone in that village thinks that I am world famous. And it's pretty amazing. So that songwriting experience led me to a lot of adventures. I wrote that album, I toured around the United States a lot. I thought I was living my dream. And a few years ago, I kind of crash landed back here in Fort Lauderdale. And I was kind of disheartened. This album that I put everything into, all these experiences, it was great, and I would never take any of them back. But here I was now in my late 30s, and I crash landed back where I started. I didn't really have a job. I didn't have a place to live. I was living in a bunk bed above my friend's washing machine in his spare bedroom. And all my friends were starting businesses and getting married and adulting. And I started to think about the decisions that I made and how they wound me up here. So I got disheartened, right? And I wound up back in Lauderdale. And all I had ever tried to do was run from this place. I moved to Orlando, I ran to Montreal, I moved to Berlin, and I tried to get as far away from here as I could because I didn't believe that this place fostered the culture that I was interested in. And so, lo and behold, everything I did, all these experiences crash landed me right back here, kind of down and out and bummed. And it hurt for a couple years, but eventually, I got a job, I found some love, and I had some amazing support from my hometown. And I started to create again. And it's very interesting because the sound that revitalized and breathed new life into my career and my inspiration was the sounds that I came from. It was the sounds of my city. And it was this place, the place that I had ran from and tried to get as far as I could, that actually gave me new life. And so I named my new record Lauderdale, based after the city where I came from. And it really inspired me to continue doing what I was doing. Thank you very much, guys.